In the vast tapestry of human existence, we find ourselves constantly drawn to groups, to collectives, to the intoxicating sense of belonging that comes from aligning ourselves with others who share our values, beliefs, or goals. It's a fundamental aspect of our nature as social creatures, this pull towards tribalism, towards finding our place within a larger whole. And yet, this very impulse, this drive to become a part of them, whoever they might be, carries with it profound implications and potential dangers that we ignore at our peril. Before you take that step, before you subsume your individual identity into the collective, there are crucial truths you must confront. These aren't comfortable truths. They won't make you feel warm and fuzzy, but they are essential if you hope to navigate the treacherous waters of group dynamics without losing yourself in the process. First and foremost, understand this. Every group, no matter how noble its stated aims, no matter how virtuous its members may appear, has the potential to become tyrannical. This isn't a cynical view of human nature. It's a clear-eyed assessment of the psychological forces at play when individuals come together in pursuit of a common goal or identity.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
The road to this tyranny is paved with the best intentions. It begins with the natural human desire for order, for a sense of meaning and purpose in a chaotic world. We look to groups to provide this structure, to give us a framework for understanding our place in the universe. And in the beginning, this can be beautiful. It can provide us with a sense of community, of shared purpose, of belonging. But here's where it gets dangerous. As we invest more of ourselves in the group, as we begin to derive more and more of our sense of self-worth and identity from our membership, we become increasingly vulnerable to the group's influence. We become less willing to question its dogmas, less able to see its flaws, less inclined to challenge its direction, even when it veers into dangerous territory. This process is insidious. It doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual erosion of individual autonomy, a slow surrender of personal responsibility in exchange for the comfort of group identity. And before you know it, you find yourself defending ideas you once would have found abhorrent, supporting actions you would have previously condemned, all in the name of loyalty to the group. You might be thinking, that won't happen to me. I'm too independent, too critical thinking to fall into that trap. But that's exactly what everyone thinks. The truth is, none of us are immune to these psychological forces. They operate at a level deeper than conscious thought, tapping into our primal need for acceptance and belonging. So what's the solution? Should we avoid groups altogether? Retreat into isolated individualism? No, that's neither practical nor desirable. We are, after all, social creatures. We need connection, community, shared purpose. The key is to enter into these group associations with our eyes wide open, fully aware of the potential pitfalls and armed with strategies to maintain our individual sovereignty. The first step is to cultivate a strong sense of personal identity that exists independently of any group affiliation. This means doing the hard work of self-reflection, of grappling with the big questions of who you are and what you stand for as an individual. What are your core values? What principles are you unwilling to compromise no matter what? What's your personal sense of meaning and purpose? These aren't easy questions to answer. They require deep introspection and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about yourself. But this self-knowledge is your first line of defense against the erosive effects of group identity. It's the anchor that keeps you grounded when the winds of group pressure start to blow. Next, you need to develop the capacity for what I call simultaneous engagement and detachment. This means being able to fully participate in a group, to contribute your energy and skills towards its goals, while simultaneously maintaining a critical distance. It's about being in the group, but not entirely of the group. This is a delicate balance to strike. Too much detachment, and you miss out on the genuine benefits of group membership, the sense of community, the shared purpose, the collective achievements. But too much engagement, and you risk losing your ability to see the group objectively, to recognize when it's veering off course. The key to maintaining this balance is constant vigilance. You must regularly step back and assess your relationship with the group. Are you still able to disagree with the group's consensus without feeling intense anxiety? Can you entertain ideas that run counter to the group's dogma without immediately dismissing them? Do you feel free to leave the group if it no longer aligns with your values? If you find yourself answering no to these questions, it's a warning sign. It means the group's influence over you is becoming too strong, that your individual identity is being subsumed into the collective. This is the moment when you need to reassert your autonomy, to remind yourself of your core values and principles. Another crucial aspect of maintaining your individuality within a group is the willingness to be the voice of dissent. This isn't about being contrarian for its own sake. It's about having the courage to speak up when you see the group heading in a direction that conflicts with your personal values or that you believe is misguided. This is perhaps the hardest part of group membership. Humans are wired to seek approval, to avoid conflict, to go along with the crowd. Speaking out against the group consensus requires tremendous courage. It means risking rejection, ostracism, the loss of the very sense of belonging that drew you to the group in the first place. But it's precisely this willingness to dissent that keeps a group healthy, that prevents it from descending into dogmatism and tyranny. By speaking up, you're not just preserving your own integrity, you're potentially saving the group from its worst impulses. Of course, dissent comes with risks. You may indeed face rejection or criticism. You may find yourself pushed to the margins of the group or even expelled. But here's a truth you must internalize. If a group cannot tolerate respectful dissent, if it demands absolute conformity of thought and action, then it's not a group worth belonging to in the first place. This brings us to another crucial point. You must always maintain your ability to walk away. This means cultivating a sense of self-worth and purpose that isn't dependent on your group membership. It means having a life outside the group, maintaining relationships and interests that have nothing to do with the collective identity. The moment you feel like you can't leave a group, whether due to fear, dependency, or a sense of obligation, is the moment you've surrendered your autonomy. You've given the group power over you that it should never have. Remember, you should be choosing to be part of the group because it aligns with your values and goals, not because you feel trapped or because you can't imagine life without it. As we approach the end of this first segment, I want you to reflect deeply on this question. What parts of your identity are truly yours, and what parts have you adopted from the groups you belong to? This isn't a question with a simple answer. Our identities are shaped by our interactions with others, by the cultures and communities we're part of. But there's a difference between being influenced by a group and being defined by it. The goal isn't to eliminate all group influence from your identity. That's neither possible nor desirable. The goal is to be conscious of these influences, to critically examine them, to actively choose which aspects of group identity you want to incorporate into your sense of self and which you want to reject. This process of conscious identity formation is ongoing. It requires constant self-reflection, a willingness to challenge your own assumptions, and the courage to stand alone when necessary. It's not an easy path, but it's the only way to ensure that when you become a part of them, you don't lose the most important part, yourself. Now that we've laid the groundwork for understanding the perils of group membership, let's delve deeper into the psychological mechanisms that can trap us in toxic group dynamics. We need to explore the subtle ways in which our need for belonging can be exploited and how we can guard against these insidious influences. One of the most powerful forces at play in group dynamics is the concept of loyalty. Loyalty, in its purest form, can be a noble trait. It's about standing by those who matter to us, about keeping our commitments, about being reliable and trustworthy. But in the context of group membership, loyalty can become a double-edged sword. Groups often demand loyalty as a prerequisite for membership. They may not state it explicitly, but the expectation is there, lurking beneath the surface. And as we become more invested in the group, as we derive more of our sense of identity and self-worth from our membership, the pressure to demonstrate loyalty intensifies. This demand for loyalty can manifest in various ways. It might be the expectation that you'll defend the group's actions or beliefs, even when they conflict with your personal values. It might be the pressure to prioritize the group's needs over your own. It might be the implicit understanding that questioning the group's leadership or direction is a form of betrayal. The insidious nature of this loyalty demand is that it often comes cloaked in positive language. You're not being asked to compromise your integrity. You're being asked to stand with your brothers and sisters. You're not being pressured to ignore your own needs. You're being encouraged to sacrifice for the greater good. You're not being silenced. You're being reminded of the importance of presenting a united front. This kind of language can be incredibly seductive. It appeals to our desire to be seen as good, as committed, as valuable members of the group. And it taps into our fear of rejection, our dread of being cast out and alone. But here's the hard truth. Loyalty to a group should never supersede loyalty to your own values and principles. The moment you find yourself compromising your core beliefs in the name of group loyalty is the moment you've crossed a dangerous line. This doesn't mean you should abandon a group at the first sign of disagreement. Healthy groups can accommodate a diversity of viewpoints. They can engage in respectful debate and discussion. They can evolve and change in response to the input of their members. The problem arises when loyalty is demanded as a form of unquestioning obedience, when dissent is treated as disloyalty, when the group's identity becomes so all-encompassing that it leaves no room for individual expression or growth. To guard against this, you need to develop a nuanced understanding of what true loyalty means. Real loyalty isn't about blind obedience or unquestioning acceptance. It's about commitment to shared values and goals, yes, but it's also about having the courage to speak up when the group is straying from those values. It's about being willing to challenge the group to be better, to live up to its stated ideals. In fact, I would argue that the most loyal members of any group are often those who are willing to voice uncomfortable truths, to push back against groupthink, to demand accountability when leaders or other members fail to uphold the group's principles. This kind of loyalty, critical, engaged, principled loyalty, is much harder than the blind variety. It requires courage, discernment, and a strong sense of personal integrity. But it's the only kind of loyalty that's truly valuable, both for you and for the group. Another psychological trap we need to be aware of is the phenomenon of cognitive dissonance. This is the mental discomfort we feel when we hold two conflicting beliefs or when our actions don't align with our beliefs. In the context of group membership, cognitive dissonance can lead us down a dangerous path of self-deception and moral compromise. Here's how it often plays out. You join a group because it aligns with your values and beliefs. Over time, you become more invested in the group. You form friendships. You take on responsibilities. You start to see your membership as a core part of your identity. Then, the group does something that conflicts with your personal values, or perhaps you start to notice patterns of behavior within the group that make you uncomfortable. This creates cognitive dissonance. On one hand, you have your personal values and beliefs. On the other, you have your loyalty and commitment to the group. These two things are in conflict, and that conflict creates psychological distress. To resolve this discomfort, we have two options. We can either change our beliefs to align with the group's actions, or we can challenge the group's actions to align them with our beliefs. All too often, people choose the former. It's easier, it's less risky. It allows us to maintain our sense of belonging and avoid the pain of potential rejection. But this path leads to a gradual erosion of personal integrity. Each time we choose to adjust our beliefs rather than challenge the group, we move further away from our authentic selves. We become more entrenched in the group identity, more resistant to outside perspectives, more likely to defend actions we would have once found indefensible. The alternative, challenging the group, is harder. It requires courage, it risks conflict and potential rejection, but it's the only way to maintain your integrity and potentially influence the group in a positive direction. To navigate this challenge, you need to develop a high tolerance for cognitive dissonance. You need to be able to sit with the discomfort of conflicting loyalties and beliefs without immediately rushing to resolve it. This gives you the mental space to critically examine both your beliefs and the group's actions, to seek out additional information, to engage in dialogue with others both inside and outside the group. It's also crucial to remember that groups are not monoliths. They're made up of individuals, each with their own thoughts, doubts, and internal conflicts. When you're experiencing cognitive dissonance about the group's actions or direction, chances are others are too. By voicing your concerns, you may be giving voice to silent doubts shared by many. This brings us to another vital point: the importance of maintaining connections outside the group. One of the most dangerous aspects of intense group involvement is the way it can gradually isolate us from outside perspectives. We become so immersed in the group's worldview, so surrounded by people who share the same beliefs and values, that we lose touch with alternative viewpoints. This isolation makes us more vulnerable to groupthink, more susceptible to manipulation, more likely to lose perspective on the group's flaws or excesses. It's a form of intellectual and social incest that leads to stagnation at best and dangerous extremism at worst. To counter this, you must consciously cultivate relationships and interests outside the group. Engage with people who hold different beliefs. Read books and consume media that challenge your assumptions. Participate in activities that have nothing to do with the group's focus or mission. This diversity of input serves several crucial functions. First, it helps you maintain perspective. It reminds you that there's a whole world beyond the group, that your identity and worth aren't solely dependent on your group membership. Second, it exposes you to alternative viewpoints and ideas, keeping your mind flexible and open. And third, it provides a safety net of sorts, a network of relationships and interests you can fall back on if your relationship with the group becomes problematic. Now, let's address an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes, despite our best efforts to maintain our individuality and integrity, we may find ourselves in a group that has become toxic or destructive. The signs can be subtle at first: an increasing intolerance for dissent, a growing us vs them mentality, a tendency to demonize outsiders or former members. In these situations, we face a stark choice. Do we stay and try to change things from within, or do we leave? There's no universal answer to this question. It depends on the specific circumstances, on the nature and degree of the group's problems, on your position within the group, and your capacity to influence its direction. But there are some key factors to consider. First, assess the group's willingness to engage in self-reflection and change. Are concerns and criticisms taken seriously, or are they dismissed or attacked? Is there a mechanism for members to influence the group's direction, or is power concentrated in the hands of a few unaccountable leaders? Second, consider the personal cost of staying. Is your mental health suffering? Are you consistently compromising your values? Are you becoming someone you don't recognize or respect? No group is worth sacrificing your fundamental well-being or integrity. Third, be honest about your motives for staying. Are you genuinely hopeful about the possibility of positive change, or are you simply afraid of losing the sense of belonging and identity the group provides? Are you staying out of commitment to the group's original values and mission, or out of habit and fear of the unknown? If you decide to leave, be prepared for it to be difficult. Groups often don't react well to departing members, especially those who leave due to ideological differences. You may face accusations of betrayal, attempts to guilt you into staying, or even outright hostility. But remember this: your primary loyalty must be to your own integrity, to your own sense of what's right and true. No group has the right to demand that you compromise your fundamental values or suppress your authentic self. If leaving is what you need to do to honor your principles and preserve your well-being, then it's not just a right, but a responsibility. As we conclude this segment, I want you to grapple with this question. If the group you're part of suddenly disappeared tomorrow, who would you be? What would give your life meaning and purpose? What values would guide your actions? These aren't hypothetical questions. They're at the heart of what it means to maintain your individual sovereignty while being part of a collective. Your answers to these questions are your North Star, guiding you through the complex terrain of group dynamics and helping you strike that crucial balance between belonging and independence. Remember, the goal isn't to avoid groups altogether. We need community. We need collective action to address the big challenges we face. But we need to engage with groups on our own terms, with our eyes open to the psychological pitfalls and our wits sharpened against the subtle erosion of our individuality. Only then can we truly harness the power of collective action without losing ourselves in the process.